The recent announcement of Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield definitely got fans of the series excited about the new generation coming to the Nintendo Switch later on in 2019. However, now we're starting to see, a few days after the announcement, the hype and the excitement of everything dying down a little bit, and the fan base starting to talk a little bit more about possible hints for future updates that we're going to be getting about this game, such as new features, new content, and other important things that fans are concerned about concerning Sword and Shield. While we did get a lot of information revealed about the game in the initial Nintendo Direct, such as gameplay footage, the map, starter Pokemon, and the logos, there's a lot more stuff that fans want to know about this game, such as the legendary Pokemon, the evil team, the plotline of the game, and so much more. And we're probably going to have to wait a long time to find out this information. However, what if I told you there are many hints left within the Sword and Shield trailer, as well as some of the other information about the game, as to what some of these things may end up being. Today I'll be going over 10 interesting hints that I found, some of them more obvious than others, and obviously not all of these will end up coming to fruition, and some of these may just end up being speculation on my part. However, many of these could end up being actual teases for content that we're going to be seeing in Sword and Shield, and that's why I wanted to make a video about this today. I encourage you to leave in the comment section down below any hints that you saw in the trailer and your favorite things about Sword and Shield so far. And with that being said, let's get started. The first hint that I want to talk about in this video are the ties to royalty and the possibility of this relating to an evil team organization or some important characters in the plot. One of the main features in every new Pokemon game is the crime organization, the main villains that you're going to have to fight throughout the game, and the main drivers of the plot most of the time. Sometimes they serve as a simple distraction from your main quest of getting gym badges and becoming champion, but other times they seem like the most important factor of the game. And this is what's so significant about an evil team in Pokemon. Some people like it when the evil team isn't so involved in the plot, and some people don't like that as much. Some people prefer it when an evil team is just off to the side. However, for Pokemon Sword and Shield, I do think it's very likely that the evil team is going to be based on royalty because of these flags that we see in this screenshot of the trailer. Royal imagery is used here, such as castles and whatnot. This could hint at the evil team organization being based off of royalty. After all, this region is based on the United Kingdom, where royalty provides a figurehead for society. There's a deep history involving royalty there, and you would expect that Pokemon would want to pull things from that to use in this game. Now, obviously the royalty here may not be related to the crime organization. I just assume that because you could fight against the powers that are corrupting the region. That's a thought that I had for a plot idea. But you could end up having to be in a position where you save the king or the queen from the crime organization itself. Either way, I think this is a hint at royal significance in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Let's move on to one of the more famous hints within the Sword and Shield trailer that's getting everybody talking about it. These markings within the grass. What exactly do they or could they be representing? Well, according to many fans who were investigating what this could possibly be, this is based on the Cernabis giant, who is a 180-foot giant, and it's significant in some folklore and potentially could be used to base off of a future legendary Pokemon. After all, in these carvings in the grass, the giant seems to be terrorizing what's around him and is invoking fear and what appears to be people running away from him. This is something that a legendary Pokemon would definitely provide to any citizens who end up seeing it. Would the legendary Pokemon look like this? Probably not, considering the wolves that take up a prominent spot in the logos for Pokemon Sword and Shield, and you expect the legendary Pokemon to kind of be based off of those. However, this could definitely be another legendary Pokemon or a significant piece of the lore of the game. This is hinting at something very big, and not just big in terms of the size of the giant, possibly big in terms of how much it impacts the game. The next hint that I'm going to be talking about in this video is a hint to a possible battle frontier or a battle facility in Sword and Shield. If you take a look at the map of these games, near the top of them is this big city. Now, in about the last decade or so, Pokemon titles have all had this big hub city within them, this larger location where most of the big events in the story take place. Normally there's a gym located there, and you'll have all your big department stores and whatnot. This is something that was within some of the older Pokemon games, but amplified even further. I'd say it was around the introduction of Castelia City when that really started to be happening. This could end up being the big city for this game, but because the starting town appears to be at the bottom of the region and this is at the top, one would assume that the Pokemon League is here. But one cannot deny whether it ends up being the big metropolitan city or the Pokemon League, that there's many other buildings around there, so even if it ends up being a league, possibly more post-game content could be taking place here. And with all of these buildings, one would wonder, is there a battle facility in here? If Game Freak is starting to listen to some of the criticism from fans about the newer titles, one of the big things that they would end up implementing in response to it is the lack of a major battle facility, which is something that many competitive fans or fans who just like battling offline would desire from the game. This is a feature that's so desired by fans, and because of this large complex up here, it definitely reminds me of some of the battle facilities from Pokemon games past, the cities that they're taking place in, and maybe some of them are included in here. This could be a hint at that. Next, I'd like to talk about the possible hints at the final evolution types of the starter Pokemon. This is something that's very significant because the starter Pokemon generally have the largest impact out of any Pokemon in the region's roster on a person who's playing the game. You're going to be spending some time with these guys, and if you end up playing through the entire game with them, you're going to be spending the most time with their final stage evolution, which means they've got to be good. And in the cinematic introduction scene that we got for Grookey, Scorbunny, and Sobble, we actually get some hints, potentially, at what their final stage evolution typings could be. Scorbunny is initially seen running along this iron, hinting that it could be fire and steel type. However, another hint for Scorbunny's typing is within its design itself, with this tape that seems to be above its nose. We've seen, and a prominent example is Maylene from Generation 4, where this tape hints at them being a fighting-themed character, which means that Scorbunny could be everybody's favorite typing for a final stage starter, fire and fighting. Man, I'm going to be very excited to see that one. I love that typing for starters. It's very underused. We don't get to see it very often, and I really think that it deserves to be in the new Pokemon games because we haven't seen it enough. Moving on to what could be a more interesting and unique starter typing, and that's Water and Ghost for Sobble, because as we see Sobble come out of the water, it appears to be invisible initially. Now this could be just an animation thing, or it could end up hinting at it turning invisible, which is something that ghosts tend to do, which could end up being its final typing, and that would be pretty interesting. Grookey I could see being many types. It's a grass monkey after all, but something that does potentially hint to its final typing. This is probably the weakest hint out of the starters that I'm going to be talking about today, is that he takes his stick and hits it on a rock multiple times in the first scene that we see him in, which could end up meaning that he's grass and rock by the final stage. This may not end up being the case, but it could be a very subtle hint at what's to come in the future concerning this Pokemon. Another feature that I want to talk about is the possibility of non-linearity for this game. Now, initially looking at the map, it seems like this game is going to be pretty linear. After all, you start out at the bottom, and it appears to be going to the top, like I mentioned earlier, where potentially the Pokemon League will be. However, this evidence that I'm about to show you, and it's pretty small and may mean nothing, could hint at there being many more branching paths than we expected, and potentially more ways to get to different locations within this game. Look at this sign in the background of this scene here. There's many directions on this sign, which hints at multiple pathways, which is something that many fans have been requesting for, as many preferred the non-linearity in the style of the first couple of generations, as opposed to what we more modernly get is a hand-holding experience guiding you along the way. Now, I enjoyed some of the newer Pokemon games with this style, however, I understand why some fans want it back to the older way. Now, we just got the Pokemon Yellow remake in the Let's Go style, so you did get this form of a Pokemon game very recently, and who knows if Game Freak would want to do this back to back, but this could hint at least this game being a little more non-linear than fans initially expect just based on the map alone. The next hints could be hinting towards a very big feature that's located within the Japanese logo for the games. In the Japanese logos, there's these symbols with the red on the top, white in the middle, and a blue on the bottom that could potentially be hinting at new features for these games. But why would I think that these logos are hinting at anything special? After all, these are the same logos seen when you enter the gym, which could potentially debunk this. However, what I'm about to tell you may change your mind about this. For Generation 6, we got the Mega Keystones and the Japanese logos for X and Y. This was a very significant feature and what much of the plot of those games were built on. For Generation 7, we got the Z Crystals and the logos for Pokemon Sun and Moon, the Japanese logos. So these icons can't mean anything, and if they don't really mean anything, it's going to be meaning that they break the pattern that they've established over the past couple of generations. Why would this logo be present at the gym location then? Well, this new feature could potentially be heavily related to battling, like the Mega Evolution and Z-Move features that we got in Generation 6 and 7 respectively. In a leak before Pokemon Sword and Shield came out that perfectly predicted the names of the games, it also says that armored Pokemon may be a thing for this game. Now, we don't know 100% that this leak is real. It could be one of those leaks that have partially true information and partially fake information, and we've seen many of those. But a new feature like that affects the Pokemon in battle could be something expected based off of the hint that we're given here. The next hint that I'm going to be going over is a possible mining minigame, and this is because of the heavy emphasis on mines here. Many regions within the United Kingdom has mining as one of their primary industries, and I'm sure this is going to be highlighted a lot in Pokemon Sword and Shield, especially considering the designs of some of the towns and in the map where we get to go underground in multiple points. Some of these are on the train, but you are also seen in the trailer walking underground in this area that looks very nice with all of these digging tools near you that could just be objects that are uninteractable. But what if you can interact with them? What if you have a mining minigame similar to the Explorer Kit from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl? The graphics down here look very nice, and if you're only down here for a short period of time, it would kind of seem like a waste, wouldn't it? What if you spend lots of time down here doing this mining minigame like you did in the Underground in Generation 4? Then you could carry this feature over for the Diamond and Pearl remakes that could potentially happen next year, which would please a lot of fans, and that way you don't have to develop this feature closer to the launch of Diamond and Pearl, and you can focus on other things involving that game, like perfecting some of the features that weren't as good within those games, and you would just get more content in the Generation 8 games. It would be a win-win right there, and I'm sure many people would be excited to explore some of the side content. The next hint is for some potential sports minigames, and this is because you're seen walking into a soccer stadium with a soccer uniform on. I also love the 227 put on there because that's Pokemon Day. It's also the national dex number for Skarmory, if you're wondering what Pokemon that is. And maybe that has some sort of hint to the armor of the game and whatnot, but I think it's mainly just for the Pokemon Day purposes. Anyways, the main thing that I wanted to focus on here about this point is because he's in a sports outfit, and potentially this could lead into some sort of sports-themed minigame. Along with this, what's seen in the trailer, it also looks like the starter Pokemon could have some relation to sports as well. Scorbunny's name even has Score in it, and while I'm sure this is for Scorch, you can't tell me that you can't see this little bunny rabbit playing soccer. They could make sports a bigger thing here, especially considering the larger stadiums that some of the gym battles appear to be shown in. With this Lucario versus Tyranitar fight that's shown in the trailer, maybe they don't just want to have Pokemon battles here, but you could have this little mini game involving your Pokemon there as well. Maybe this is a revival of the super training mechanic from Generation 6, and that's where the sports gets implemented. Who knows, but sports are definitely playing a role in these games in some form with this scene that we're shown here. The next hint that I want to talk about are these stones that are lying everywhere within the trailer. You normally just sort of skip over them and don't tend to focus on what these stones represent so much because they're everywhere. However, all of these stones have markings on them, which could potentially relate to the legendary Pokemon or some of the lore and mythos surrounding this region. In every previous generation of Pokemon, there have been hints for what's next earlier on in the game, and especially with some regions, I go to Generation 3 is one of the primary examples of this, where there's stones and markings everywhere hinting towards Groudon and Kyogre. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, there's this entire cutscene there with Steven Stone, and he's looking at the markings inside Granite Cave and what they could potentially mean in relation to the legendary Pokemon. These stones will probably be significant in some way. In terms of what yet, we don't really know. However, they're definitely hinting at something. And I really encourage you to let me know in the comment section down below what you think that is. The final feature that I wanted to talk about today that's potentially being hinted at in the Sword and Shield trailer, and I saved this one to the end because it's probably one of the most wild theories that I have here and one of the biggest theories that I have here as well. The idea of exploring two regions in one game was really only explored in Generation 2, and while you had games like Black and White 2, which allowed you to go back and explore the areas of Unova that you explored in the original Black and White, which I thought was very nice and was very similar to how Heart Gold Soul Silver worked, it's not quite the same as going back and revisiting an entire region. But what if they brought this concept back for Generation 8? This is something that's very wild, might not happen, probably won't happen. However, there's large relations with England and France, especially some war history there. What if they make this Galar and Kalos region relationship a big thing within the game, and have you ending up going to Kalos after you complete the game. This may just seem like a wild theory on my part purely because of the region that the game is based on, but I do have a little bit more evidence to support this. Why is this fletchling on top of the house featured so prominently here? Why does it get shown for a couple of seconds just spinning around? Do you think this would be a hint at something bigger? And if not, then why would they show this Pokemon? Why wouldn't they give an outline of the bird Pokemon for this generation? It doesn't make too much sense to show the Generation 6 bird in this capacity. Why are trains featured so much in this game when we saw trains a lot in Pokemon X and Y? Especially this one train station that never really got used. We thought they could have been saving it for Generation 7, where you go back to Generation 6, but that didn't end up happening. We see many trains throughout the Galar region. Could we be using one of them to get back to this train station here and visit Kalos? This cave here reminds me a lot of Glittering Cave from Pokemon X and Y, mostly because of how beautiful the design is and how it looks, but this could be a hint that we're going to be exploring some of the caves within Kalos. The likelihood of us getting a feature this big in a new Pokemon game is probably slim to none, but if you hear any of the requests from Pokemon fans, it's this feature that was in Generation 2. There are many areas within the Kalos region that never ended up getting explained and probably could have used a third version. The power plant here is a big example of this. I assume that Volcanion was intended to be there initially, but didn't end up actually being there. So if they want to have this segment where you go back to Kalos and you have this fight with Volcanion there, that would work out very well. There are many loose ends that could be tied up, and it would be such an amazing, highly requested feature for them to implement in this game, and for them to knock it out of the park with Pokemon Sword and Shield, this would definitely assist in doing so. What do you think about Pokemon Sword and Shield? Let me know in the comment section down below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed. And I have some other videos on screen right now that you'll enjoy if you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.